Uh, my focus today is to try and make sense of my paper in 20 minutes. It's 15 pages condensed to about 6. So I'll try to be brief. I think the importance of hope in fostering both individual and collective resilience is a key point. How hope helps individuals and communities overcome adversity in the face of challenges is a goal. Probably, if there's a takeaway that I'd like you to consider when you go home today, is embedded in the language we learn are the judgments we make, and how that impacts everything that we do. My sources, again, interviews from my MA and from my PhD research. And I've had a little help from Al Gore's group, the Climate Reality Project, and have borrowed some of their slides. In an era marked by growing environmental crisis, political polarization, and social inequality, hope often seems elusive. Yet hope remains a crucial element for driving positive change. My paper combines insights from my master's research about climate change and the many faces of denial, along with preliminary findings from my PhD studies about the cause and effect of polarization and how the words we use open up or shut down conversations. Both research projects benefited from experts who join me on my weekly radio program and podcast. They help me understand these interconnected issues and why they're critical for addressing the broader implications of human preconceptions and societal divisions. Many have become colleagues, and they've become friends and more like collaborators than research participants. They're artists, they're academics, they're activists, they're scientists, lawyers, psychologists, social workers, and more. Whoops, sorry. Growing homelessness, disconnectedness, racism, endless wars, and isolation are symptoms that indicate something is very wrong and getting worse as our planet heats up and more people around the world are thrown into uncertainty. It doesn't help when people like Paul Gilding say that it's time to stop worrying about climate change and that we need to brace for impact. Or when David Attenborough and Jane Goodall tell us that the Earth would be better off with a fewer number of people. There are no shortages of dire warnings. Ken Burns reminded us recently that we are our own worst enemy. We are dialectically preoccupied. Everything is either right or wrong. Red state or blue state, young or old, gay or straight, rich or poor, Palestinian or Israeli, my way or the highway. Everywhere we are trapped by these old, tired binary reactions, assumptions, certainties, and presumptions that are imprisoning. While I was doing my master's program, I had the opportunity to speak with about 70 different scientists, academics, and change makers. One of them was Roy Scranton. He's an English professor, and he had just published, sorry, I'm not paying attention. And he had just published a book called Learning to Die in the Anthropocene. It was probably one of the most depressing conversations I've ever had. And I almost quit my MA program. And I frankly felt pretty lost. And this is what he said. Now I have no audio.
People say miracles happen. So a miracle might happen, right? Totally possible. But you can't put all your money on like the 1% chance, right? I mean, it's not realistic to assume that a miracle is going to save us. What's realistic is to understand how humans have behaved, to look at how humans have behaved historically, to look at how our political structures and infrastructures work now, and to recognize that no one is driving the car, no one is going to save us, and we need to face this downward slide with some awareness and consciousness. You know, I think we need, especially as things continue to spiral out of spiral into chaos, you know, at a political level, at a climatological level. I think we need to manage this process, this transition to whatever comes next, as consciously and as conscientiously as we can. And I think the only way to do that is to make time to really face it and really think about it, to sit and meditate, like Tuna Tomo advocates, like to sit and meditate on our doom, right? To sit and meditate on our death, right? Daily. Like, I think we need to do that.
See what I mean? Pretty depressing. Interesting for me, about the same time that we had that interview, or I had that interview with him, I had a near fatal car accident. And in my class at SFU, my master's class was studying Seneca on dying. So it was a pretty sobering time, or reflective time for me. And while I was recovering, I started reading Seamus Heaney, who was helpful, if not life-saving. The idea that hope is rooted in the conviction that there is good worth working for allowed me to contemplate what I can do to support myself, my family, my friends, and my community. Unlike mere optimism, hope involves an active engagement with the world's problems, underpinned by a belief that in the potential for positive outcomes through sustained effort and collaboration. Rebecca Solnit says, it's the axe you break down doors with. In an emergency, hope in this context is seen as a dynamic and action-oriented mindset and can inspire us to persist in the face of adversity. It's about envisioning a better future and working tirelessly to bring that vision to reality. The importance of hope is underscored by its capacity to encapsulate her question. Do you need a little, Mary Oliver's perspective encapsulated in her question, do you need a little darkness to get you going, complements Heaney and Solnit by suggesting that moments of crisis or despair can serve as powerful catalysts for change. Darkness, whether personal or collective, often compels us to confront uncomfortable truths and seek solutions with renewed vigor. Judith Butler wrote that we need to create a social environment that allows us to consider how our lives are profoundly implicated in the lives of others and the interconnectedness we share. Black Lives Matter's co-founder Alicia Garza discusses the importance of inclusive organizing and movement building. She emphasizes that winning is about more than being right, that to achieve meaningful change, it's crucial to invite others to participate, even those who might not initially recognize the need for change. This approach broadens our base of support and fosters a more robust movement by engaging diverse perspectives and experiences and letting other people in. To find the change we need to be able to think differently about the questions we ask. The way we think about a question organizes the way we answer them. To have a whole new world of answers, we need a whole new world of questions. Garza says that one way to get people to a different place is by walking with them. The best arguments in the world won't change a single person's point of view. And this reflects how deeply held beliefs and personal experiences often outweigh logical arguments. Hereditary Chief Bob Joseph says, the only thing that might change this is a good story. Our stories are conversations, our multidimensional understandings of what we think and what we say, what we mean, what others hear, and how we feel. When we take the time to engage in deeper present conversations, we open the door to discovering hope and promise in profound ways. To address those who oppose or who are indifferent to deeper understanding, we must ask questions differently and perhaps look to methods like deep canvassing, where people are invited to share their emotionally significant experiences and stories. This approach fosters mutual understanding, grounded in lived experience rather than debate or talking points. When conversations are approached this way, research suggests that people's experiences often lead them away from prejudice, stigma, or fear, and towards empathy and a willingness to consider progressive solutions. Some call these individuals storytellers, some call them bridge builders. Harvey Whitehorse refers to them as barrier crossers. This comprehensive engagement with ourselves and others can be a powerful catalyst for transformative personal and social change. However, to truly affect change, it's essential to not only understand the present, but to also recognize the historical conditions that have shaped our current landscape. This approach is crucial when learning how we arrived at our current global challenges. If we don't understand the conditions that got us here, then it's easy to think everything is brand new and that we can come up with any number of ways to address those conditions that aren't grounded in what created many of these problems in the first place. Jason Moore and Raj Patel offer a compelling, if somewhat simplistic overview of how and why human societies, elements, and structures have been formed over time. In their book, A History of the World and Seven Cheap Things, they sum up the 7 things that they believe got us to this place in history: nature, money, work, care, food, energy, and lives. There are many places in history where humans had already created environmental degradation. However, they believe they weren't globalized until Columbus, who gets much of the credit, brought European values to North America. Moore and Patel believed they were compelled to conquer the world, encouraged by religion, to combine commerce with warfare, and the battle waged was not just against competing faiths, but against the notion of independent thought. When talking with Naomi Klein, she argued that the roots of the climate crisis are deeply embedded in the capitalist economic system, which prioritizes profit over people and the planet. She emphasizes that the same systems of exploitation and oppression that drive climate change also perpetuate racism, white supremacy, and social inequality. Klein argues that meaningful debate or meaningful climate action must be intersectional. While Chris Hedges and others are waiting for a revolution, I wonder if we don't want to throw away the wisdom we've gained from our experience of historical emergencies, what a non-revolutionary climate-conscious politics might look like. It seems that if we're not prepared to burn down the system, we have to fix our democracy to fix the climate and the many other interconnected social justice issues all around us. Thankfully, the world has come a long way in accepting that climate change is real, but humans can't seem to agree on how serious it is or what should be done about it. I've come to better understand why many people embrace denial rather than give in to fear or hopelessness. That denial comes in many shapes and sizes or faces. It's not surprising, and it can impact the conversations we have. Perhaps David White is correct when he says denial is deeply underestimated as a state of being. It's an ever-present and ever-splendid thing when seen in the light of its merciful and elemental powers to cradle and hold an identity until it's ready to move on. Faced with the depth of loss and disappearance in the average life, a measure of denial is creative, necessary, and self-compassionate. Refusing to face what we are not yet ripe and ready to face can help us live in the present. There are unsuspecting movements, acts of bravery, activism, and love that may carry the day. The chaos theory deals with complex systems whose behavior is highly sensitive to slight changes in conditions so that the smallest alterations can give rise to strikingly great consequences. Similarly, we know from history that social, cultural, and political change does not happen overnight. It doesn't happen in predictable ways or on predictable schedules. Humans don't know what is going to happen or how or when, and in that uncertainty, there must be room for hope. For me, hope is not just an abstract concept, but a practical force driving transformative change. The majority of people that I talked with in this work believe that hope is vital in tackling climate change and social justice, highlighting the potential for innovation and collective action when pessimistic narratives that we create or others do are challenged. They believe that to create a sustainable and equitable future, we must shift our perspective from fear and despair to optimism and collaboration. This shift enables deeper connections with each other, our communities, and the planet, fostering resilience and determination in the face of adversity. The insights from these activists and scholars emphasize that hope is rooted in the belief that there is good worth working for and that meaningful change is possible. Conversations embedded with compassion, curiosity, and connection can engage people's better instincts and build support for shared solutions. As Mary Oliver's words remind us, embracing the world's challenges and possibilities with urgency, purpose, and care can help a brighter, more resilient future, changing hearts and minds one conversation at a time. Interesting, in my interviews, I had a couple of repeat participants. One of them was Sephora Berman. And it's an interview I go back to often when I get very depressed. And hopefully this audio will work.
I went to the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Copenhagen. And as if anyone remembers that, it was about 8 years ago. It was a disaster, right? We couldn't reach a global deal. It was one of the most depressing things I've ever experienced in my life, because the contrast of sitting there in front of the world's leading scientists who were literally crying as they were presenting their reports because the science that had come out that year was so devastating. You know, the head of the Secretary General of the United Nations opens the conference by saying, we either reach a deal here to address climate change or we are dooming humanity to oblivion. The UN Secretary General, right? Like, that's the contrast. And then we did nothing, right? Yep. So I got really depressed. And I came home and I thought, it's too big. We're all doomed. I don't know what to do. And I ended up spending some time with my grandmother, who was in her 90s. And I was telling her about this. And she said to me, are you kidding me? Like, do you understand how much the world has changed in my lifetime? She said, when I was having your mom and her 7 children, she had 7 children. She said, we didn't have a car. I didn't know anyone who'd ever lived on a plane. We didn't have a television. We had a radio. We had a phone, but it was a party line. When it rang twice, it was for us. You know, and so she said, no one had ever even thought of computers or cell phones or that Raspberry you're always holding, she said to me, talking about my BlackBerry. And she said, so the world will entirely change in your lifetime. There's no question that it's possible for the world to change in your lifetime to such an extent that these issues can be addressed. And so when I get overwhelmed, I think about that moment. And I think about this I imagine telling my grandchildren years from now about this crazy time in our history, you know, when we dug at the earth to get at the last of the oil, this crazy time in our history when we chopped down the last old growth to make catalogs, or even this crazy time in our history when we used to fill our cars with gas. And they'll barely believe me because the world will be such a different place.
So that's my worst interview and probably my best interview. And I still play Sephora quite a bit. So that's pretty much my paper. Thank you.